Get breaking news, updates, and the best of talk.
Women have to work twice as hard for them to get things that just come so naturally to a lot of men who feel that leadership is their right.
You were in prisons for how many years?
For 6 years, 8 months.
Were you going to court from prisons then?
Yes, but before I started court, it took me 2 years.
Just being in prison?
Yes.
Without your case even start at
in
all?
Confinement.
You were there?
Yeah.
Here on your number one station for talk, 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Be part of the discussion. It's Borderline.
On 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Above and beyond borders.
Beyond borders.
It's Borderline.
With Ireti Bakare-Yusuf.
Let us dive into the heart of global affairs.
We go beyond the headlines and into the real stories shaping our world.
Why pay more than $200 million to have 1,000 Kenyan soldiers come to Haiti when we could use that money to train the police?
What you've done with your grief is actually to spread it and give it and turn it into the love.
This served Netanyahu because he didn't think Hamas would ever be a serious military threat.
Congo is a country with so much wealth. The people have been fighting to regain control.
From the corridors of power to the front lines of change, Borderline brings you in with analysis of the issues.
The U.S. has power over them. Most of them will steal money from Haiti and invest in the U.S.
Some people who support Sonko and Jumai, over half of them don't have a voter's card.
Sounds like Nigeria.
Join Ireti Bakare-Yusuf on Borderlines as she engages with policymakers and thought leaders,
giving you perspectives and insights you won't find anywhere else.
Be part of the conversation. Join us live.
Your voice matters on Borderlines as we explore the complexities.
Every Friday at 4 p.m.
on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Stay informed, stay engaged.
Step into the conversation.
And welcome back to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. Right, I have a new guest with me. He's actually new to the show, so it's an absolute pleasure to have him. The first time I met him, I approached him. I don't go stalking men, but I did stalk him, I have to confess. We were both stuck at the airport. I don't know whether he remembers. And our flight was going to be going into like 1 a.m. or something. And I was asked, I demanded to be sent back home, take me back home. I should not be traveling at this time, I said. But he was very calm, as professors like he's usually are. Professor Aworawo. Most people don't pronounce it well. I made sure, I was determined I was going to pronounce it well. His name is Professor David Aworawo. Am I correct?
No, you are not correct.
What happened? Which part of it is not correct?
The entire pronunciation.
Okay, go on, tell us. So what is it? It's not Aworawo.
It is not Aworawo. It is Aworawo.
Aworawo, which is what? Ondo? Where is that?
No, that's Delta.
Well, that would be your fault then. How am I supposed to know? I'm supposed to pronounce it like I'm from Delta, you see? I blame you for that. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. After that encounter, that night.
Yes, it was a crazy one, but so it is. Here we are, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you. It's even more important that I'm going to be having a conversation with you about something so critically important, something that the Global South has been complaining about, something that has been weaponized against us all these decades, and nobody thought we would get here today. The International Criminal Court warrant against Netanyahu. So when you first heard, what were your immediate thoughts?
Well, I was, I felt a sense of satisfaction for two reasons.
Please, Chair.
One, because for so long the court focused on African leaders and important personalities in Africa, so much so that some African leaders have, thought of pulling out en masse, African states pulling out en masse from the ICC on account of the focus almost exclusively on African leaders and important persons across the continent. That's one. And then two, because of the horrendous activities going on in, the Middle East generally, in Gaza especially, in the aftermath of the October 7, 2023 attack on Israel by Hamas. There's consensus that the response has been disproportionate. The use of force has not been in tandem with what is required, and the strategy has not been in line with what we know internationally as the way to fight terrorists. And the consequence has been, deaths of innocent people in that enclave. So for those two reasons, I felt some sense of satisfaction that the ICC issued that warrant of arrest on the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, it's interesting how long it's taken for the warrant to come through, isn't it? And at some point, to think that when Karim Khan said, look, I'm going to be applying for a warrant of arrest for Yoav Gallant, for Ismail Haniyeh, for Netanyahu, for David Dief, and others. As of the time when he said that, he started to get threats from the United States. What did you make of that?
Yeah, it's in line with how international relations is conducted, unfortunately. In the conduct of international relations, might is still right. Unfortunately, some great powers haven't used their powers in the way one would expect. In this case, the United States. Nobody will pretend not to see the horrendous conditions of the people of Gaza. And in most instances, Gaza is equated with Hamas. Hamas is a group that operates in Gaza and beyond. The tendency is to just say, oh, all those terrorists, and then just go there and kill indiscriminately. Everybody sees the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which is why it is surprising and disappointing that the United States have taken measures that, have not been in tandem, even with the values that the U.S., has held over the year, for a long, long time. So the threat was disappointing, but not surprising given the way the international system is structured and the way international relations is conducted, in which those powerful states, use their power in line with, wherever their interest might lie at different times.
Which now brings me to a great point, because it brings me to a question that I often ask my guests since October 7th. Would you say October 7th, in and of itself, and that's not to say the atrocities that happened are okay, that's not to justify it in any way, but we do know that events shape our lives, they shape history, they shape the future. October 7th, as an event in and of itself, appears to have reshaped the way the smaller countries now actually communicate, the way, if you like, they sort of face off with the bigger countries. The smaller countries appears to have bigger voices now. They seem to be more courageous than they were before. Would you say that?
In some sense, yes. Because before now, the thought was that the international system protects all, and that all states are equal, theoretically. at the United Nations General Assembly, all states are deemed equal. And that a system had been established over the years which gives protection to the weak and the vulnerable. But in the last 2 years or so, beginning with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, where one strong country thinks, well, the smaller country and the weaker country could be pushed hither and thither, and in a particular direction. And of course, in the aftermath of the October 7 attack, where it became very obvious that the protection the weaker states thought they had, does not exist. And so that has emboldened them to speak with, more, to speak more forcefully. It has also been a sense of solidarity among them that they need to come together to protect their common interest. Because that structure, the values they thought existed, which ought to protect, the weaker states, simply do not exist. And so, yes, to a remarkable degree, yes, many states have found their voices, and they are speaking out clearly regarding why the global system should operate and protect all. Let's see how all of those shape the global system moving forward.
Back to the ICC warrant. If Karim Khan is going to since he has issued a warrant for Netanyahu, surely by extension he has also issued a warrant for Joe Biden. Not so?
Not exactly. Not exactly. Not exactly, because the war in Gaza, although the United States has given extensive support to Israel in the prosecution of the war, it is a bit difficult to link the U.S. directly and by extension Joe Biden.
How so? How so? If I may interrupt you, how so? Because we do have evidence that it's American bombs. We have evidence that U.S. Something is happening. We have evidence that UK ammunition. These bombs have made in the USA. They have where it's made. So how is it hard to prove?
It is hard to prove because supplying weapons in itself does not indicate how the weapons are used. The mere supply of weapons by one country or one leader to another country or to another leader does not have embedded in it how those weapons are supposed to be used by that state. So that reduces the responsibility of the supplier of the weapons. I mean, in law, these are all of these things play out. And if the ICC attempts to stretch the arrest warrant, those will be arguments, and they will be valid. That the mere support for Israel, the mere supply of weapons, does not indicate how those weapons ought to be used or are used. And they will also point to intermittent, voicing out of leaders like Biden, UK Prime Minister, that the Israel should conduct the war in Gaza, of course, in Lebanon, with restraint, and that humanitarian law should be applied. The innocent should be protected. They will point to all those comments, whether they were meant or not. That makes it difficult to directly link either Biden or any other Western leader as directly culpable in Israel's activities in Gaza and by extension also in Lebanon.
So if what you're saying, actually, before I go forward, if you just move a bit closer to your screen, they're telling me in my ear that they need you to move closer to the screen for some reason, if that's possible, sir. Yes, move your chair a bit closer. Yeah, I believe that must be better. Thank you so much. So what you're saying to me then is that America cannot be held for complicity. UK cannot be held for complicity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
that's correct.
So then why then should America care that Israel has been issued, or that Netanyahu has been issued with a warrant of arrest, is now pretty much a wanted criminal, which is what we really can't call it. Why should America then care?
America should care because of the moral, the ethical component. America has a moral body in all of this. If a body, an international body established 2002, which has done a lot to protect human rights and the vulnerable, especially in times of war, has issued such, a warrant of arrest, and giving the support, as we have just, pointed out, given by the United States, especially, and of course, the United Kingdom and some other Western countries, and giving the feeble voice that they have presented to try to call the Israeli leaders to order in the way they have, carried out this war, then these countries have a moral body. Their capacity to pontificate and tell others, these are morally wrong and all that, greatly diminished. And that is why they need to worry about that. This, a warrant of arrest that has been issued on Benjamin Netanyahu and, of course, Gallant and others.
But okay, so why then doesn't the same apply to Putin? Or would the same apply to Putin? So, for instance, part of the reasons why Iran is treated as a pariah state, quote unquote, the likes of China, quote unquote, is because Putin has a warrant issued against him. He couldn't even go to South Africa. However, they've been told that they shouldn't have been doing any business with Putin in the first place, even though Iran is now doing business with Putin by way of ammunition I'm talking about. Why is the rule different for them and another rule for America, as you're telling us now?
The rules are not different.
They're just treated differently because they're brown.
Oh, no, well, not exactly so. Well, sometimes, of course, those factors play out. Some other time, it's the factor I talked about before, might is right. On several instances, the principles that apply, the way the United States, the UK, and these other countries are treated, is not exactly the same way that, some of these other countries are. Just to give you an example, after this arrest warrant was issued, many Western countries, including France, indicated their desire and willingness to arrest Netanyahu if he came to their countries. But after a while, just after a couple of days, France came out to say, Israel is not a signatory to the statute establishing the ICC and all of that, and consequently, the warrant will not apply with force to Netanyahu. But of course, people quickly reminded the French leaders that Putin is a sitting president of Russia, and at some point, Uhuru Kenyatta in Kenya between 2012 and 2014, even after he had become president, had to appear before the ICC to try to respond to the charges against him in the aftermath of the 2008 elections in Kenya, in which 1,200 people died. The point I'm making is that these things don't apply evenly sometimes, and most of the time, but almost all the time, it is when big powers, great powers, or even the superpowers are involved that this discriminatory interpretation and the actions, are carried out, which are some of the defects of the global system that we'll continue to complain about.
Yes, exactly. And that is a big defect. I mean, in fact, what you said, let me read a quote from Kenneth Roth, the former head of Human Rights Watch, who said, France's lawless announcement that it wouldn't arrest Netanyahu if he shows up despite an ICC warrant for him looks like a payoff for the Lebanon ceasefire. But excusing war crimes for a ceasefire only encourages more war crimes, a dangerous mistake. And that's why it surely can't be a case of sometimes might is right, because might must always be questioned. Might, it would appear most of the time, is often wrong. Okay, and might seems to get the world in a lot more trouble than not. Wouldn't you agree, Prof?
Yeah, might cannot always be right, and as we said at the outset, that the smaller countries are finding their voices. They are speaking out clearly. They are challenging the status quo. All of these are indications of, the fact that might cannot always be right. And when people try to push the narrative that might must be right, there are others who challenge that status quo and ensure that that is not the case. Because a world in which might is right is the guiding principle. It's a dangerous world to live in. A world in which, the common good, the rules are established and they apply to all, is one in which stability can be ensured. And so, yes, might is right. Might is right most of the time. It's not all the time that might is right. And even when might is right, in reality, the world in which the contemporary world challenges that narrative. Unfortunately, it is helping us to have, a stabler and saner system than would have otherwise had.
Let's talk about this. So, for listeners, for those of you who don't know, what basically has happened again is that something totally unprecedented. Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, and if you don't know Yoav Gallant is the defense minister, Israeli defense minister, who actually called Palestinians human animals. And he said, no food, no fuel, no electricity, they're blocking everything, and we are going to be acting accordingly. And this is where a lot of you that have been listening to this show, you've asked me, you'd argue with me about genocide, this and genocide. And I keep saying to you, genocide has a definition. It is not about the number, whether you've killed 100 million. It is about narrative, saying what you're going to do and actually acting accordingly. Sir, Professor, talk to me about your understanding of genocide, because this unprecedented warrant is about the fact that Yoav Gallant and Benjamin Netanyahu are basically, they've been accused of genocide now. Correct?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Help my listeners to understand why genocide is so very different to a massacre or ethnic cleansing or any other type of, war crime. Would you mind?
Yeah, genocide is somatic violence, and somatic violence is a deliberate attempt by a person or a group of persons to kill people. But in this context, is somatic violence that is carried out a deliberate attempt, a measure to kill a people for who they are and what they are. Yes, so the genocidal dimension to the Israeli operation in Gaza is encapsulated in that comment you made reference to earlier, that that Gallant made, human animals.
Human animals, yeah.
So the killing is not for anything else other than for who they are and what they are. It could be, across border, in which is international. It could be even within a state. When a leader of a state deliberately singles out a group of people for who they are, what they are, to kill them, it means that that leader has committed or is committing genocide. So there are different categories of somatic violence. In this case, it is identifying a group of people for who they are and what they are, and attempting to kill them or actually killing them. Now, we also have somatic violence that is carried out when soldiers of one country are at war with another country and they are fighting. That one is, just people dying in war. We also have somatic violence in which an individual deliberately kills another, that's murder. But in this case, it's somatic violence carried out against the people for who they are and what they are. That is what distinguishes genocide from other types of somatic violence.
Now I hope you understand. You can now call, or I'll try to pick up your call. You can call 02012770993. Female line is 0201-4657190. WhatsApp is 0809-597-5805. You know the definition. Do not call to waste our time to argue about the definition. It's been defined for you. Now, let me go back to my question. There are 126 or so countries who now have an obligation to actually arrest Netanyahu if he steps into their country. So far, surprisingly, we know that Canada has said, and I'm sure it's begrudgingly, he has said, yes, he will. Okay? We know there are other countries who will. The UK is pretty much still umming and ahhing, talking about seeking advice. France, we know, has used their legal responsibility to negotiate for a ceasefire, which is a different debate all over. Where do you think this leaves the international community at large? What will they do? What kind of conundrums? Where can they go? How can they shift?
Well, in the international system, the state system, as we call it, sovereignty is a very powerful element. So what leaders who have been indicted like this do, except a few, is to be careful about the countries they go to. Those countries, for instance, in this particular context, Hungary, President Orban of Hungary already said he will not respect the ICC warrant. He's even inviting Netanyahu to visit Hungary. If Netanyahu goes there and travels out of the place, nothing will happen because Hungary will have exercised sovereignty in a particular way, and that's why it ends. You see, there is something about international law which is very sickening, and that is that the mechanism for enforcement is very, very weak. In fact, sometimes non-existent. And so the law is there, people break it, nobody to enforce it. So it is just there, That is why, from the 17th century when the analysis of international law became intense, Google closures and the rest of them. One question that, scholars have asked persistently is that, is international law? And that question is asked on account of the very weak or sometimes non-existence mechanism for enforcement. And so the enforcement of this ICC warrant, the efficacy will be to the extent that countries are willing to enforce it. Countries that, like for instance, the United States, will not enforce it. Nothing will happen. Hungary will not enforce it. Nothing will happen. So that commitment to... So
it's more symbolism. It's more symbolism rather than actualism.
Well, not entirely, not just symbolism. See, not just symbolism, because there are countries that will actually arrest Netanyahu if he visits, if he lands on their... Yeah, so for those ones, it's reality, it's not symbolism. So the ruling itself is general. It's supposed to apply erga omnes, as they say, that is universally.
Yeah.
But countries that desire not to enforce it, nothing will happen to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there is no sanction for a country not respecting it.
Exactly.
It's really more reputational damage.
Yes.
Right.
To put it fairly and squarely. That is what it means. But of course, for countries that are willing to enforce it, they will enforce it. And it will just be in order. Of course, you made reference earlier to why Putin did not go to South Africa, because he wasn't sure he would not be arrested if he did. So
even though the South Africans actually, said to him, "You can come. You're our guest." So another country could easily come in there and then arrest him, right? That's what you're saying. That's what he wasn't sure of.
Yeah, we wasn't sure of how things would play out. You know, maybe some action that will embarrass him, even if he's not arrested.
Yeah.
And so he simply didn't. You also recall that Omar el-Bashir also went to South Africa. And, you know, there was this urge to arrest him. But African leaders said, oh, look, African solidarity, Pan-Africanism, this man came for an African activity. If you must arrest him, let it be some other, you know, occasion. Yeah. Not this one.
Not an African.
And that needed South Africans from acting. So that is how the international system functions, international law is operated. Unfortunately.
Right. You can call. Sorry, I wasn't able to. I didn't want to interrupt, Prof. You can call now and I will pick up your phone. But, okay, they already started calling. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello, Sister. Good evening.
Good evening. I need you to speak up, please. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question.
Ireti Bakare.
Ireti Bakare. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So I want to greet your guest and ask a quick question. So he did say about the complicity of the United States in the crimes, the obvious crimes that are being committed by Israel against Palestinians. He did say that although they are supporting Netanyahu, but that the fact that they have said that Netanyahu should be responsible in the way he uses their weapons. That, I believe, well, my question would be, will that apply to the first cargo of weapons? Or will this also apply to the second cargo after it is proven?
Right, I see what you're saying.
Used in an irresponsible manner.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So continue to supply these weapons.
Right, I see what you're saying. So what you're saying is, if I may just summarize for you, what you're saying is, would that caveat emptor still apply, even now that a warrant has been issued?
Clear. Yeah. Now that it is clear that they are misbehaving,
that he has actually been misusing. Right. Okay, Prof, you heard that, right? I'll come to you. Yes. Let me answer. Okay, please hold on to it. I'll come to you. Let me answer more questions, more calls rather. Hello. Hello? Hello?
Your call has been...
Hello?
Yeah, good evening, Sisi.
Good evening.
You have Emmanuel speaking to you from Epe.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Recently, there is this ceasefire between Lebanon, Hezbollah, and the Israeli government by proxy. What does your guest think about it in respect of what's happening in Gaza?
Okay.
My first question.
Emmanuel, you always have two questions. Okay, I'll let you off today. Just this time. Oh, I was just going to let you off. But you heard this question. I'll come to you in a few minutes, Prof. Emmanuel, you can. I was going to let you off. Hello?
Hello, Sister. Good evening.
Good evening. Come closer to your phone, please.
Yeah, can you hear me now? This is Chris from Ikeja.
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Your question, please.
I have two questions that I want to ask your guest. Though I wanted to ask your former guest something, but he didn't pick my call. Now, my first question goes this way. Interpol, doesn't they have an oversight against many states?
Such warrants, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Such warrants, arrest warrants, so against any state that they can go to any country to arrest anybody without anybody's permission.
Okay, that's one.
My second question goes this way. There's a tweet I read on Twitter on X the other day concerning this issue in Gaza. So the Israeli Defense Headquarters reported an issue that the people that are bringing a health is something to the Palestinians are bringing ammunition. That is why they are bombing and arresting some of these people that are taking something, maybe humanitarian something to the people of Palestine. So they are bringing ammunition instead of food and other social amenities to them. So I want your guest to say something concerning that issue.
I think you should have asked that of the previous guest.
Yeah,
all
I
right.
speak my call. That is
well, sorry. Okay, thank you. Final call, and then I'm going to give Prof a couple of minutes to respond. Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I want to ask from your guest.
Would you speak louder, please, and closer to your phone?
I want to ask from your guest.
Your name, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, your name, please.
I'm John.
John, go ahead.
Now, the issue of arrest warrant by ICC, I want to ask, what are the criteria for any country to law enforcement agents to arrest somebody like that? Because Putin went to a country that he was supposed to be arrested. Rather than being arrested, he was given a red carpet reception.
Okay.
So what are the criteria? What are the reasons for that?
Okay, thank you. Right, Prof. Oh,
Yes.
I'm going to be kind. I'll give you what? The lines are going crazy. 3 minutes to respond to all of those.
Yes, I'll respond very quickly.
Go ahead, sir.
The first question has to do with the U.S. Continuing to give support to Israel.
Yeah.
In the aftermath of the arrest warrant.
Yeah, doesn't that make them complicit now if they weren't before?
Complicit. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't because, despite the arrest warrant, don't forget, it's two sides.
Mm-hmm.
Israel itself has been attacked by several groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others. And of course, in the aftermath of the October 7th attack, Israel has the right to defend itself. It is the how question that we're asking, not whether Israel has the right to defend itself. What happened to Israel itself on that October is horrendous, and it ought most to be deprecated. You don't just catch people, rape women, and all that. We deprecate it, intent. But to that extent, despite the ICC warrant, the U.S. will say Israel needs to defend itself. Israel is endangered. Iran is there, which is, a country that supports many of these groups, and which has at some point also said Israel will be obliterated from the maps. So the argument we started with will continue, on the part of the United States, that how Israel uses those weapons is the responsibility of the Israeli and not theirs. Theirs is to support an ally that is endangered and under threat from, several enemies. So despite the arrest warrant, the U.S. will not be directly culpable in, what Israel does or is doing in Gaza. The second question is it has to do with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Yes, the same thing that Israel, has done in or is doing in Gaza. It also did before the ceasefire. Now let's see how it goes in Lebanon, because in Gaza it was Hamas. In Lebanon, in solidarity with Hamas, Hezbollah began to also fire rockets, into Israel, and Israel responded, and the thing escalated. The same pattern they followed in Gaza that we condemn by just killing discriminately also took place in Lebanon, and innocent people also died in large numbers in that operation. So the same pattern, the same principles apply, the same condemnation. Unfortunately, the same inability to hold these countries, supporting Israel to account, also prevails. Somebody asked about Interpol, arresting, somebody that the ICC has issued a warrant, an arrest warrant. It doesn't apply. It applies on strictly criminal cases, and also all the time too, at the request of the country. There's a way the Interpol functions. But someone that the ICC has issued an arrest warrant on does not fall within the spectrum of who the Interpol will just begin to go after to arrest. The fourth question asked the question about the health, some health facilities in which some weapons have been found.
Yes,
that is a couple of hospitals in Gaza where clearly. Were kept. Again, that is
allegedly
one of the things that Israel has also pointed to justify its position in some of the things it has done. That in spite of that, we know how terrorists ought to be fought. We also know that terrorists, by their nature, mix up with the civilian population, which is why you do not go after them the way you go after conventional armed forces that are distinct. So the fact that weapons are found in some hospitals does not justify the indiscriminate killing that Israel has carried out in Gaza. There's a way, through intelligence, you're able to identify and then take out the terrorists with minimal or even no collateral damage at all. Israel has done it before, and one is surprised that in this particular instance, Israel just threw away all that is stood for over the years and then decided to go the way it has gone. Then finally, the last question has to do with it. What did he say now? Let me look at the question. What's the criteria for arrest?
Yes.
Yes. What's the criteria for arrest? The criteria for arrest is the interest of the different states involved. Is the interest. If it's just like I explained,
it's politics purely.
Yeah,
economic politics.
To the ICC,
yeah,
and thinks that, or is convinced that what the person against whom the arrest warrant has issued actually is culpable. Of course, it goes ahead to arrest. But some other states may feel otherwise. Like I've said, talked about Hungary, saying that the ICC arrest warrant does not make any meaning to it. And that's where the US also takes a similar position. That's also where it ends. So the criteria is just national interest, national position, politics, just as you have said.
Thank
and
you.
Nothing more.
Thank you, Prof. Hello.
Hey, madam, good evening. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
You have to sit up right here.
Titi Lokwe. Go ahead.
Thank you. Number one, sorry. Please, let's go to Russia someday before the end of the year.
We've been trying to get to Russia. We're still waiting for our guests.
We have to do Russia before the
Jeremy Tokwe, we have been working on this since last year. You are using up your time.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. ICC,
Prof, you get to know it's a relationship. Myself and my listeners.
Can you hear me here?
Yeah, go on.
ICC, since inception, has only concentrated on African leaders. We have Chancellor in the dock. Again, now president, former vice president of Kenya, visited there and he was, freed. Now, people have been calling for the kind of crime, what kind of happened with the WMD, that is Bush Jr. and Tony Blair. Even in the UK House, some of them are raising the allegation, even interacted with Tony Blair, because there was no reason why Iraq should be invaded in the first time. So are we talking of double standard here?
Okay.
Especially with the fact that America gave the former ICC leader, Patrick Bensouda, chairperson, a persona non grata that shouldn't go to America. So are we saying here that it is only when it is in their interest, just like the way Putin is rattling them now, they will say, we have to go after.
Okay, wrap up, Temi Tokwe.
Yeah. So I want you to talk. Why should we have an establishment that is non-effective? Then everybody's be talking. So why can't we just stop all of this? Instead of just being hypocritical. Thank you.
Okay. And I promise you, we will get to Russia. I'm close. Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. Your name, where you calling from, please?
Pastor Badamosi. Good evening.
Pastor, go ahead.
I want to ask a question. If Netanyahu visits Nigeria, will he be arrested by the Nigerian government, by the ICC, or Nigerian government will allow ICC to arrest him?
Okay.
Yes, that's my question.
Thank you, Pastor. Hello. Okay. I think we can get on with that for now. Pastor Gbadamosi has a way of asking one of those questions, right? Prof, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Right. I like his last question. So, should Netanyahu arrive in Nigeria, would we arrest him? Or is that a question for the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who will probably then say, he needs to speak to the Attorney General, who will probably then say, I need to speak to the President. Wait, he's in France. The line's not going through.
Well, I'm not the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I'm not the Attorney, but I can hazard a guess.
Please do.
Yes. If Netanyahu comes to Nigeria, he will not be arrested.
Tell us why.
He will not be arrested because of the delicate balance. Nigeria's mix is delicate, and of course, the social structure is precarious. The Christians tend to support the Israeli cause in the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Muslims also tend to support the Palestinian cause in the Arab-Israeli cause. Nigeria has carefully attempted to, successfully stayed away from the controversy by maintaining a neutral position. Should Netanyahu come to Nigeria and is arrested, it will be deemed that, because the president is Muslim, the vice president is Muslim, and that's why it has happened. Should he not be arrested, the Muslims will hold President Tinubu and others responsible for, just as you have said, some excuses will be looked for. The man flies out, the man has gone, sorry. But I can bet you if Netanyahu comes to Nigeria, he will not be arrested. Because of Nigeria's internal delicate balance, our heterogeneity confines us to maintaining a neutral position in all of this. And it will translate to not arresting Netanyahu if he comes to Nigeria.
Okay. Do you have other questions there, or can I go to the lines?
No. There's one other question I was asked.
Okay, go ahead.
Regarding the U.S. invasion of
yes,
Iraq.
of course, by Titi Lokpa, yes. Which is an excellent point, actually.
Double standard in the international system.
Yes.
It speaks to which country would arrest any American, or which institution or organization or agency will arrest an American.
I need to have you back on this show. We need to have that conversation because, Prof, it would appear to me that you sound defeatist, given that America is actually, evidently, losing its hegemony. You seem to think that they're too big to fail, but they're clearly slowly moving closer and closer to fail.
Yes, I'm a realist. I'm just being realist. I'm not carried away by what ought to be. I'm speaking about what is. And that is it. That is what is. From what the Americans did in Iraq, it's obvious that, the invasion of Iraq in March 2003, that's the second invasion, and not the one that took place, when Iraq invaded Kuwait.
The second one. Yeah.
It was a joint multinational force. But that of March 2003 was just the United States, and of course, Tony Blair supporting Bush at the time.
WMD.
Clearly, laws of war were violated. And there was no clear reason why Iraq should have been invaded in that particular instance. The weapon of mass destruction they talked about never existed.
And Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Let me answer.
So you will imagine that the ICC will have, and by the way, ICC was established just shortly before that invasion.
Yes,
that should have been first major action of the ICC. But as you have said before, the great powers and superpowers are dominant in the global system, and they tend to
act with impunity.
Yes, without catastrophic consequences.
Of course. Right, we only have 3 minutes left to the end of the show. Hello? Okay. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. Or good evening, rather. Okay. We do not have time for that. Right, so you and I can use up this to... Prof, first and foremost, I need you to come back. Because we do have to have this conversation about the reshaping or the seeming reshaping. You say you're a realist, not an ambitionist. So we have to have this conversation about the seeming reshaping of, the global order and reorder and where we appear to be going, especially in relation to the global south. That's important. However, let me ask you one thing. If the might continues to be able to be allowed, to be permitted to act with complete and utter impunity, where then does it end? Where does it end? Where is the safety for the likes of us in the global south? Where is the safety for even when it comes to climate change? When it comes to all those other atrocities that are happening to smaller countries, the really tiny countries. For instance, Trump now wants to take back the Chacos Island because, you know, they're worried about the American base that's there. Well, tough. It's already gone back to the Mauritians. Where does it end, Prof? Where does it end? You have a minute.
Yeah. It has been there since 1648, when the modern international system was established, following the signing of the treaties of Osnabrück and Münster, the one we call Treaty of Westphalia. It's been like that. But the good thing is that the tendency to defy international law with impunity has reduced in the last half a century, progressively. And that is because other countries, including countries of the global south, in the post-1960 independence period, have continued to raise their voice. They've held these countries to account and prevented them from going to the extreme in this, philosophy of might is right. Somebody mentioned the other time that if countries are defying, the ICC and international law, why should the ICC exist? And the simple answer also answers to the question you have just asked, and that is that the ICC may be weak. The ICC, some of the pronouncements may not be obeyed, but it will be worse off if it didn't exist.
Okay.
Because it places we're not talking about moral body now in the United States, United Kingdom, and some of these other countries. If the ICC had not issued that arrest warrant,
thank you.
So it tends to limit the capacity to carry out might is right to the extreme, and that is where we should continue to be. That is the advocacy for a world that is a world that is fair, a world that accommodates all.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Listening to your
That's
number
it.
one station
We're out
for
of
talk.
time.
99.3
Thank you so much.
99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Some take their descent.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's